والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا أبا القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. Tonight we're going over reflections of the shortest surah of the Holy Quran, which is what? What is the shortest surah of the Holy Quran? Surah al-Kauther. So the Sha'n al-Nuzul and usually verses have an occasion of why they are revealed. And the story behind this surah, and generally speaking, they say it's a surah in Medina, that As ibn Wa'il comes to Rasulullah after he loses his son, Abdullah. And if you look at the history of Rasulullah, that he lost different sons. According to Tafsir Namuna, he had lost, for example, he has Qasim or Abdullah, and later on Ibrahim. So he does not have any male progeny. And they come to him and they use a derogatory term in Arabic which is called abtar, which means one who does not have, one who is cut off, one who does not have lineage. Then this surah comes, and this surah, when you understand that your enemies and those who oppose you, they actually will be the ones who are abtar. They are the ones that will be tailless. But we have given you al-Kauther. We have given you abundance, a lot of abundance. Kathir, a lot of abundance to you. Lots of khair. So this surah is known to be telling that when Rasulullah had Sayyidah Fatima, according to both Al-Mizan and according to Tafsir Namuna, both of them say this is when Rasulullah was blessed with the birth of Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam. Please recite salawat for her. Allahumma salli ala. Which she herself is khayru kathir. She is, in a way, when her name is mentioned, when we think about Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam, she is the gateway to God's blessings. And we ask Allah to be under her umbrella and under the blessings of Sayyidah Fatima. Inshallah we'll live this way, inshallah we'll die this way. Ayatollah Maikaram mentions here that Kauthar is a term that has mistaq, or instances. In the clearest instance of a lot of abundance or excessive abundance is Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam. But when you look at the books, there are different meanings for Kauthar. One is a river in paradise. Two, it is the reward for the Prophet after losing his son. Three, it is the pond of Kauthar. Four, it is said that it is prophethood and Quran. These are different interpretations. Some say it's shafa'ah. But regardless, all of these things generally are khair, are good. But when you look at the verse, because it's answering inna a'tainaka al-Kauthar fasalli li rabbika wanhar, inna shani'aka huwa al-abtar, that last part is relating to the first part, meaning that we have given you this abundance and that your enemies will not have their relatives, their progeny will be cut off. This surah is a miracle itself. Because when you look at the lineage of Rasulullah and today, that from the living offspring, one of the scholars, Sayyid Murtada Amali, says that the only living offspring of Rasulullah was Sayyidah Fatima, only from one child. And how many, for example, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, from one person can you have? But she was great abundance, she was khayru kathir, because all of these saadat that today we have, Sayyids attributed, and how many of them are in charge of the affairs of the Muslims while the Imam is in occultation. and how many of them have shaken the world, and today continue to shake the world, and to show the power of the followers of Ali Muhammad. And this is one of our strengths, is these great ulama that are sayyid that we have, and that many other Muslims wish they had them, because we unite under one, for example, and we follow their guidance, and they protect us, and they protect the deen. They're, in a way, I call them as if, because in the traditions we have that we're Aytama Ali Muhammad. In the traditions, the time of occultation, we're orphans. And they are, in a way, our foster parents, our foster fathers. They're taking care of us temporarily because our imam is an occultation. And obviously it's much different when you have the imam of the age. But they are doing what they learn from the hadith, what they learn from the Quran, to protect and keep Shiism and Islam alive. And alhamdulillah, we see that today, even though it is still the occultation of the imam, these representatives of the imams have helped spread Shiism all over the world. Just like, for example, the time of Imam Hassan Askari alayhi salam, when the imam was in Samirra, and he was, in a way, in a camp watching him. They could not see him. But at that time, some people think Shiism is doomed. Imam Hassan Askari alayhi salam is in Samirra being watched. How is Shiism going to spread? Some say, historians say, this is actually one of the great parts of Shiism, because Shiism, from the wakala and the representatives, had went through vast areas, not only limited to Medina, for example, Iraq, in places of Iran, for example, and other places in the Middle East. This network of scholars and ulama and representatives of the imam have been spreading Shiism, spreading the path of the family of the Prophet. So therefore, this is one of the miracles of the Holy Quran, that the progeny of Rasulullah today is so numerous. So many sayyids we have, alhamdulillah, throughout the world, and throughout different countries, not only in Iran and Iraq and Pakistan and India and Lebanon and Saudi Arabia, in different parts of the world we have Sadat. And then we look at the progeny of the Umayyads, who claims to be Yazidi, who claims to be from Muawiyah. Actually, some of these same takfiri people, I don't want to mention their names today, some of them that were the heads of the groups of some of these takfiri terrorists, they wouldn't say, I'm from Muawiyah or from Yazid. Even them, they would say, I'm from Imam Hadi, from, for example, Rasulullah. They themselves would say, I'm Bani Hashim, that I'm Sayyid, for example. So therefore, we understand that this is a miracle of Quran. And we said that Surah An-Nasr, for example, foretold the victory of Fathu Makkah, because it said, that this will happen, for example. Or other cases we have in the Holy Quran, miracles, that these things would happen. And this is one of the miracles, that the Sadat will be abundant, basically. The family of the Prophet will be a lot, and the enemies will be uptar. The enemy, their line will be annihilated. And you see what happened to the likes of, for example, Yazid and, for example, others. When the Abbasids took rule, they dug out their graves, the Umayyads' graves, they dug them out, and they set fire to them. This is what happened to the enemies of Rasulullah. So therefore, when you go over this surah, we said, from the text of the context, we understand this applies to Sayyidah Fatima. Or you could say Kauthar means all, frequent amount of good, lots of good. And one of the clearest examples is Kauthar is Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam. Now we get into the next verse, which is فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْحَرْ. So pray to your Lord and offer sacrifices. What does somebody do when they get a blessing? They should pray to their Lord. You should give a sacrifice. We have, for example, when a newborn is born, to do, for example, sacrifice a lamb or sacrifice an animal for them. Just like the seventh day, it's good to sacrifice for them. This is what we do, because we say this is a sign, a token of appreciation to Allah that you have granted this blessing for us. Wanhar is nahr. A lot of the mufassirin are here say nahr means another way to sacrifice, and that refers to the chest area. A person came to one of the scholars and asked, I sell camel meat. Instead of doing nahr means with you pierce the chest area. Camels are slaughtered differently. If one day you go and they tell you to slaughter a camel, remember this. How do you do it? You pierce here. So he didn't know the ruling and he slaughtered like a sheep. How do we slaughter a sheep, for example? From here, for example. And he slaughtered the camel like the sheep. They asked the scholar and he says, what do? I have all this meat. It's good. It's healthy, for example. What should I do? And he asked the office of the scholars and he says that this meat is haram. You can't, if something you're supposed to do nahr, you're supposed to, for example, sacrifice it this way through the chest, you cannot slaughter it like how you kill, for example, and do dhib, for example, a sheep. So therefore, nahr is different, and this usually refers to camels, for example. Inna shani'aka huwa al-abtar. Your enemy is the one who is cut off. The lessons that we learn from this surah are these. One is this question I ask you. Quran also talks about khair or good as usually money. Sometimes, like insan loves, is shadid. In hubb al-khair is la shadid. Loves money. Okay? Is khair or money in this, first of all, what is khair? Khair is any benefit that we can get that benefits you. Sometimes that is spirituality, sometimes it's money. Anything that assists and helps you is khair. It's knowledge, spirituality. But question that arises is this. Should ideal Muslims seek money and wealth? Or no, they should not seek money and wealth? When you look at other religions, how are the holiest people in other religions usually? Did you ever see the monk, for example? Anyone here see a monk? Usually you would not see them driving a nice car, for example, a monk, for example, or live in a mansion. They live, a lot of times, they're supposed to be disdained from the world, possibly not even married. Or when you see in Catholicism, a religious figure, and for the Christians, again, usually they're not supposed to be married or nuns. In different religions, usually when it comes to religion and high levels of spirituality, not the normal people, the highest level of spirituality and religion, religious people, usually means that you are tariq dunya. You should have nothing to do with the dunya. You should separate. You shouldn't get married. You shouldn't have, for example, have a home. You shouldn't work. But how Shaykh Mutahari mentions, he says that Islam is the religion of balance. And no religion is balanced as much as Islam. You see that the prophets, the imams, they worked very hard. They had wives, they had families, they had children. A lot of times, sometimes I go and Christians see me, or for example, if they see me, some of them are surprised. They're wondering, am I married or not? Like, can we get married or not? Because in some religions, you don't know. Maybe marriage is something bad because you're having a relationship with the other sex, for example, when you're married. But you see the balance in Islam that no, be married, work. But how Imam Ali says, and how beautifully he says, Zuhd doesn't mean that you do not own anything. Zuhd means that nothing owns you. Zuhd means that nothing owns you. When you look at the life of Imam Ali, you see he worked very hard. He had lots of income. Some of the wells that he dug, and he did such a good job in terms of quality that today they exist. He didn't do, for example, God forbid, a bad job or a lousy job or to cut corners. He built a well that today there are Bi'r Ali alayhi salam. There's water that comes from these wells. Or you have, for example, so much income that he was not in need of Baytul Mal when he was the Khalifa. He did not have an income from Baytul Mal because they had mawqufat, they had endowments themselves, they had so much money that they did not need a salary from the government, for example. So when it comes to income, Imam Ali alayhi salam in that way was not a zahid in getting income and working, because our imams worked hard. Sometimes they would work and there would be sweat under the sun, and people would say, why are you doing this? Why are you farming? Let your servants farm. And they would say, better than me, I think it's Imam Kadhim alayhi salam, one of the Imams, better than me used to work. Rasulullah worked, Imam alayhi salam worked. So therefore you see from this that there is a misunderstanding sometimes about high levels of spirituality and work. That it is, for example, bad to work. We have traditions. If a person goes to work and it's hard, their sins will be forgiven. Their sins will be forgiven. And that a lot of deen and religion is in work. But the part that we have to think about zuhd and asceticism is the attachments, which unfortunately, a lot of times many of us, we work, we get income, but then we start to change. Our priorities change, we change. Have you yourselves ever seen someone had a friend that became very rich? Maybe, they had a business, they became very rich, they got lots of inheritance. You cannot be able to relate with them anymore. You cannot be their friend, for example, because usually when someone is rich, they like to have friends that are also rich. They want to do things with their own friends, with their same level. The problem here is that most of us, if we become super rich, we will not use it in the right way. Maybe there are people here right now that are very super rich. We don't know. Maybe they are a crypto whale. I don't know. Maybe there's a crypto whale right now, and every time they sell bitcoins, it causes the whole market to shift. We don't know because nobody knows what's in another person's wallet, for example. But generally speaking, right now, if you became a billionaire, what would you do? How would you live? And sometimes when we ask Allah to give me khair, give me money, give me fulus, give me lots and lots of money, it's good. Again, having a big house is good, having a good vehicle is good, but the problem is if that takes you away from dhikrullah, you forget Allah, that is the problem. That is dangerous. And can we tolerate this or no? And will I be the same person with all that when it comes to, for example, Salatul Dhuhr or Salatul Asr, I'll pray on time even though I have so many obligations? You see the example of Tha'laba. Tha'laba was a person that comes to Rasulullah and asks him, pray for me, I want to be rich. Came to the Prophet, pray for me, I want to be rich. And the Prophet does not pray for him. He keeps insisting and insisting, pray for me, I want to be rich, I want to have lots of money. Finally, from his insistence, this is a free world. They praise for him. And Tha'laba, for example, his flock that he has multiplies and multiplies and multiplies so much, they say he cannot live in Medina because he has too many sheep, for example, too many animals. Because he does not live in Medina, he cannot come to congregation prayers anymore. Now he is missing out. He has to hang out with sheep. For example, instead of hanging out with Rasulullah. This is his problem. Problem number 1. 2, Friday prayers. Slowly he doesn't come to Friday prayers. Okay, none of this is wajib, but you're missing out on praying behind the best creation ever. That's something you're already missing out. Now it comes for taxes. And they come to give taxes from him, and he says, no. And the Quran mentions, some of the Mufassirin say this verse of the Holy Quran can be for Tha'laba. As you see, for example, let's recite Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa Jafar. وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَلْزِمُكَ فِي الصَّدَقَاتِ فَإِنْ أُعْطُوا مِنْهَا رَضُوا. And among them are such as find faults with the Prophet concerning the distribution of the offerings for the sake of God. If they are given something thereof, they are well pleased. If they are not given anything therefore, lo, they are consumed with anger. So this verse in Surah Tawbah, verse 58, some say is about him. He refused to pay the zakah. It says, for example, is this jizya? Do I have to pay? What do I have to do this for? And then his downfall started. He stopped paying zakat, which itself is a sign that your salat is accepted. Then he continued in helping, they say, in Masjid al-Dharar, those who built this masjid that was against Islam. And then later on, he was one of those that they say tried to assassinate the Prophet in Tabuk. Some also attribute this to him. Tha'laba, what? Because of money. So because Allah loves us and wants to care for us and is our Rabb, Allah will give us khair or dunya, monetary means, if He loves us as much as is needed. As much until you don't do tuqyan. What does tuqyan mean? You ever hear of a river, for example, that does tuqyan? It means it transgresses. A river is supposed to flow this way, and when there's too much river, it changes direction and floods people. This tuqyan. We are not supposed to do tuqyan. When we have lots and lots of money, except for a few. Now, was there anyone, can you mention, that had lots of money and wealth and power that this did not cause them to not forget Allah? Can somebody give me an example? Lady Khadija, very good example. Prophet Sulaiman. In Surah Al-Anbiya, you see one of the prophets, very powerful, that had a kingdom nobody had like him. Would even speak to animals. Would have even jinn that would build for him, for example. That nobody saw. And even like the Bilqis comes and sees his kingdom and is surprised. She wants to raise, for example, her, skirt or raise her, her pants to be able to cross and not get wet. But they see that this is actually built out of crystal. It's not even water. She thought it was water, it's built out of crystal. She later on becomes, Muslim. So you have Prophet Sulaiman that was a zahid, ascetic. He lived very humbly. He ate humble food. And the Quran mentions him as one of the abd, a salih, someone that is very good, for example. Generally, Quran praises him. That's what I'm trying to say. So therefore, this is one question that we ask, and that is, should Muslims seek wealth? What is the answer? Yes, seek the wealth, but do not be attached to it, and do not hyper-focus on that part of life. Why do I say this? Because shelter, food, all these things is what animals also have. Even if you have the biggest home and the best things to eat, still you're at the level of, an animal. Because animals are at the same level. Did God create humans just for eating and sleeping in the best places? Or did He create us for something else? So when we look at Kauthar and getting lots of abundance, is there anything else besides this dunya that we should be seeking? Some of the traditions talk about knowledge. That the tradition from Imam Rida alayhi salam, that a person's iman is not complete until he has three. One of them is at-tafaqqu fi-d-din. One of them is deep understanding of knowledge. This is a great blessing of Allah. Quran mentions, and whoever we give them, for example, knowledge, we give them darajat. Or the hadith mentions that if you want to see the manazil of our Shia, ask them, see how many narrations and riwayat they have memorized. This is our capital. True, that's good to have a good home, to have a good place. But does that mean that you've reached khair kathir? Have you reached what we say al-Kauther, for example, and this lots of abundance? No. Many of the best people, if I want you to give me names from yourselves, modern day people that live the best and reach the highest, are they the ones that own the most? Or many of them were the most knowledgeable? Because that knowledgeable person knows what to do. That one who doesn't have knowledge doesn't know. He gets confused, gets tricked. Look at the life of this young student who was in around 70, 80, 100 years ago. He lived and was studying at a young age. Because back then, I was explaining this, we had a workshop recently. And I was explaining to the youth that, you guys, you're like 13, 14, 15. But back then, people would get married that were your age. Why? Why do you think people that are 13, 14, 15 were qualified for marriage? Because they didn't have this K to 12 school that we have. 12 years of school that we go, even though it's very important to go to it now, they didn't have it. So what would they do? They would work. They would work and they would get income and they're ready for marriage. They were men at 13, 14, they were men already. But unfortunately, because of extreme studying for so many years and not working and children not being raised properly, they are very, in a way, not ready for marriage, not ready for leadership. And I always tell them, when you want to get ready for marriage, your kids, don't just say because of biologically they're ready, you should get them a wife or husband or whatever, look for them. You should wait until they mature and are responsible. Give them tasks, give them chores, let them have jobs in order for them to become wise in the world. So this student was studying in the Hawza. His father comes and sees that, look, my son doesn't have coal. Back then there wasn't electricity, or at least he didn't have it. There was coal to warm him up. There was no food for him to bring to the father, for example. And he's wondering, that's it, you're at such a young age, say you're 13, 14, you're at such a young age, you need to go. You cannot study in the seminary anymore. At that time, this young student comes and asks to the Imam of the age, asks him, and does tawassul to him, that in a way that you, Imam al-Zaman, you are in charge of the Hawza. The Hawza is for you. And the ulama are, in a way, you are responsible for them. Basically, show my father, help me. Because his father says, you cannot stay in Hawza anymore, you have to leave. Miraculously, in the story, they say that someone knocks and comes to the door and brings food and brings, for example, supplies and gives him money. The father is astonished. Do you know who this guy is? Do you know who he is? No. And he knew how much his son was crying and wanted to be a student. And his father knows that somehow this is not a normal person. A lot of times Imam al-Zaman, Ajjallahu Ta'ala Fajr Sharif, will help us directly, or send representatives of people with a few chains to help someone out. And he found out, he says that no, this is a good path that you have. This is a good path. I saw your sincerity, for example. Continue this path. Later on, this child became known as Ayatollah Abul Hasan al-Isfahani, one of the supreme maraji of the Shia world. That he lived in cold and hunger, but was crying when his dad said, leave the Hawza. He was crying at his young age. So for those that have the highest station, usually it is through knowledge. And that khair that we talk about is not limited to having the best home, best food. For many people, it is knowledge, and that is one of the best ways. Higher than knowledge, and what knowledge is supposed to lead us to, is ubudiyat, and being a submissive servant to Allah. And this is what we need to work on in Shahr Ramadan. That if we want khair, we need to, dunya is good. We ask Allah, Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana wa fil akhirati hasana. We ask Allah, give me dunya, akhirah, good. But don't limit it. Give me knowledge, and give me certainty, give me yaqeen, give me ma'rifah. Allow me to meet you, allow me to see you, allow me to wish to meet you in the Day of Judgment. I think that no other time period, brothers and sisters, do we feel this need to know Allah, to worship Him in Shahr Ramadan. Because when you are thirsty, when you are hungry, and especially when you do a complete fast, when your eyes are fasting, your ears are fasting, your body is fasting. This last stage that our teacher, Sheikh Ahmad al-Mujtahidi would teach us. Says some people, they do the fast, that is the fast of the awam, the normal fast. They fast and they do haram. They don't eat, but they backbite, they lie, for example. They continue listening to music. They're not careful of hijab, for example, he says. So that is the normal fasting. Some people, their fasting is the fasting of the khas, the special fasting. That special fasting is the one who wakes up in the morning and says, God, I'm going to fast and stay away from these 9, 10 muftarat and validators of fast, but my eyes will also fast, my ears will fast, my tongue will fast, my whole body will fast. This is a great gift, khayr al-kathir. This is a great abundance. Is there anything higher than this? Yes, there is. Khasul khas, he says. And this is for the wali of God, the friend of God. And that is a person who fasts and he removes everything from his heart besides Allah. His heart is ready. His heart fasts, meaning there's no attachment, no love, except for Allah. Now, do I mean, some people get confused. They say, only love Allah. So I shouldn't love family? I shouldn't love children? One of the scholars gives this example. He says, when you talk about love of Allah and you love people for Allah, it's like this way. Look at the solar system. All the planets, they circle around the sun. All of them. Right? They gravitate around the sun. And that is orbit. If you love things, for example, and you love them because of their orbit around the sun, then that is love of Allah. For example, you love God, therefore, God created for you children. God created for you parents. Because of God, I love them. Because of God, I have this relationship. That means that is also for God. So the best type of khair that we can get in Shahr Ramadan, besides dunya, good dunya inshallah, health inshallah, iman inshallah. We said knowledge, and we're going over verses of the Holy Quran from the hadith and from different aspects. The highest thing that we can get and we prepare ourselves is to separate ourselves from everything besides Allah. And that is the Psalm of Khasul Khas. And that is when we can prepare our hearts for the nights of Ihya. The nights of Ahya, or the nights of, we say, Shab Zandadari or Laylatul Qadr. Because the angels want to descend in that night. Where are they going to descend? If my heart is already occupied, I already love so many different things. There's no more space to love. They say once, it's an interesting story, Prophet Sulaiman is known to speak to animals. And they say once he saw two birds talk to each other. It's a story, narration, they say. It was narrated. He saw two birds, and one of the birds, the male one, for example, wanted the female bird. But the female bird did not want to be with this male bird. And Prophet Sulaiman spoke to the bird and says, why do you not want him? He wants to be with you. For example, he likes you, he loves you. For example, why don't you want to be with him? He says, there's another bird that he keeps going to visit. There's another bird. I'm not the only one. He goes to visit another bird. There, Prophet Sulaiman, they say, begins to cry. He cries and he says that, God, maybe I am in the same way. There's something else that I love, that I'm actually attracted to that thing. I'm not attracted to God. He learns a lesson from these two lovebirds, for example. So therefore, if we can be like this, we can truly only love Allah, and that is the entire purpose. Because when you understand who Allah is, you will love Him. When you get to know Him, you will love Him, and you'll never ever compare anything to Him, and never put any barriers between you and Allah. May Allah inshallah make us of those who have abundant khair. Inshallah, we have good action, our fast is accepted, we have knowledge, and inshallah we have ma'rifatullah and only attachment to God. Inshallah, we can reach that stage. Ya Allah, we ask you that in these holy nights, answer everyone's prayer right now, inshallah. Everyone has special prayers, du'as, they're concerned. Either it's for myself, for my community, or I'm concerned about international affairs that are happening. Make sure these nights you do lots of du'a, because du'a in Shahr Ramadan is mustajab, is answered. Allah, cure all the sick, especially the little children, inshallah. Ya Allah, we ask you have rahmah on the soul of our departed, and allow us to be followers of the Imam of the age and see his dhuhur and his government with a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajal farjah.